Hey, what's up? Exactly 1 year ago, I posted the first video about 3D printed shoes on this channel. Now, exactly 1 year later, I've ended up with a shoe that is so good that it's ready for sale. And this shoe that I'm actually wearing in this particular moment, I want to show you in this video. Let's get started. Now in this video, I want to talk about how I've built the shoe, how it changed over this whole year, and what the biggest changes are in terms of how I printed it and in terms of some features of the shoe. But if you are not interested in that, there will come another video which will be like a real review, but from the perspective of a customer. So I really try to get myself in the perspective of the customer and then talk about how this shoe really is, also with scores from 1 to 10. But now let's get started with this shoe. And first, the comparison of the original shoe and this one right here. So on this side you can see the first version of the shoe, which I just got from Google Photos, a notification from photos that I've taken exactly 1 year ago, and it looks a hell lot different than this shoe right here. And I think this one looks also pretty good, almost like a real sneaker, just the upper doesn't look quite as good because of the shape it has, but I can tell you, if I'm wearing it, it looks a lot better, and also it looks pretty good right now. So let's walk through how I printed it and how it evolved. First of all, you of course have the original version, which was totally print in place, just one chunk of plastic, and yeah, I just printed it the way it looks now, without support. Just a lot of overhangs for the upper, which also was put in place. And yeah, it didn't look great, it didn't feel great, and you couldn't really walk in it fairly good. So then to the changes I've made here, you maybe can see in the midsole that there is a line going from here to here, and this is where I split the sole in half, and then I printed the upper part of the sole like this, and then the lower part of the sole like this. And that was perfect. I didn't really had any overhangs despite this part a bit, but that wasn't too critical. The print turned out pretty good, and also that didn't really matter because of the outsole, which I'll talk about in a second. But for the midsole changes, you can see here I have about 30 millimeters of stack height in the here, which looks like it would be a lot more, but that's also another change. Like you can see, I hope that the midsole really wraps around your foot and grabs it from the sides and the back, so that you don't wobble around in the shoe so much as you did in the first versions, and that looks pretty good and it feels pretty good either. So now for the outsole. If you might have guessed it, it is an old mountain bike tire, and also the front and the here cover looks pretty good. The tire gives it some kind of rigidity, and I pretty much really like that. As you can see for the midsole, I've used the gyroid infill pattern, which is pretty cool, and you also maybe can see that you can look through it, which I think is really cool. And yeah, it also looks pretty cool. It looks pretty generic around the sides, and pretty random, which I really like. Then to how I made it, you can see here a lot of stitches which I made. I'm not professional with stitching, but it worked out quite good. It took 3 or 4 hours, the whole shoe, which is quite a lot, but I think it was nice that I did it and didn't just glued it, because I think that worked quite good. You can also see the stitching in the inside. It's much more to see than in the outside, which is just the way I stitched it. Speaking of the inside of the shoe, you can't see really that there is an insole or anything like this. There's just a plain gyroid pattern, but I think for a summer shoe that's pretty nice, because you get a lot of ventilation also on the bottom of your feet, which is pretty nice. But for winter days or when it's getting wet, that's not ideal, because your feet get wet, which isn't perfect. Then I think I should talk about the upper, and you can see it's just this 40% infill gyroid net, and then for a bit of cushioning I added these 8% infill, like 8% gyroid infill pads right here in the back where I think it's most needed, and with the one wall line and 2 or 3 top layers. And I think they're pretty good, although I think I made them a little bit too thick. But I think they are pretty nice, and for padding in the heel, they are pretty essential. What you can see through the padding right here in the back, it gets this hexagonal shape, because those are like flats. Here's like flat, and then there is a corner right here, which isn't bad, but it's just a thing that happens. Here for the connection between the two upper parts, like I have this front part and this heel counter back part, and there I stitched like here and here, which looks pretty nice, and you could turn this into a design element. Now to the tongue, and that was probably the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems of the first shoe that I've made, that I just couldn't get in the shoe, so I've ended up just cutting the shoe open. It's a little bit too small, the opening here, so I had to cut it out a little bit. And now you can see here I have pretty nice tongue, which is detached up to here, and here all the way detached, so I can put the laces through really nice, and yeah, that works pretty good and is also very comfortable. Right here I have the front part of the upper, and you can see the detached tongue is detached right here and attached right here. You also can see it's made from 3 separate layers, so you have this thin part so it doesn't rub against your foot, then you have this standard mesh and a bit of cushioning so the laces don't cut into your foot basically, which is pretty nice. Here about the upper, you can see here this connection for the second upper part, which is here, so you can connect them like this with a bit of stitching, and that works quite well. So for the back part of the heel counter, you can see it looks pretty good. I made this slightly different than the one I've built in the shoe. Not so much of padding, I think it's like 6mm or 4mm like right here, and 2mm right here. But going all the way through here, just 2 layers for closing it off, and I think that looks pretty good. You can see the cushioning is pretty nice, and I'll implement it in the next ones I build, like the left shoe. Then you can see right here I've made one top layer, which is that it doesn't stretch out so much, because that's like the way your foot gets fixed in the shoe. If you connect those two in the front, your foot is fully locked down and you won't wobble around in the shoe, which is pretty useful. In terms of the print itself, I printed the upper with a 0.4mm nozzle, which worked quite good, just flattened out. And yeah, in the future I might try to decrease the nozzle size, maybe to 0.2mm or so, to soften the material, which could be nice. But that also increases the print time, which isn't so nice. I really hope you've liked this video, and maybe I could even help you with your own 3D printed shoes. Definitely make sure to subscribe to this channel to see more videos like this, or even the review about this shoe, which will be upcoming in a few weeks. And then, bye bye. Hallo mein Lieber.